What's up, guys? Steven Spikes at the Spike Signal here, and today we're going to be talking about the intro and outro to Arch Enemy's song Vultures. Going to be figuring out how they get that aggressive, powerful Arch Enemy sound using this song kind of as a conduit for that. Coming up right now here on the Spike Signal. So unlike some of my prior sheet music analyses, I'm going to split this one up into several parts, the reason being that there's a lot of stuff that Arch Enemy crammed into this song from a music theory standpoint to make it interesting, and I simply don't want to gloss over anything because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here that's worth talking about. So let's go ahead and turn our attention now to the song itself. You know, we have the same setup as always. I have the tabs shown right here for the guitar, both guitars, as well as the sheet music shown as well. Here you can see chord forms that are implied. There are situations also where I've noted down what chords are being implied simply by a single guitar. That's a very important standpoint when considering what's going on within the song. You know, like there can be situations where you're looking at a song kind of in a macro fashion, where you're looking at everything all together, all these notes combined, what's kind of the most logical chord to interpret. You can look at it from a fashion where you just interpret the chord strictly from the bass, but whatever you do from the bass or from the macro, you can always look within the specific guitar line and try to figure out what chords are being implied from that. And that's something else I've actually done, especially in this section of the song right here. If you'll look here, we can see that we have an A flat being implied, just for example, across the entire first measure. So I'm kind of mixing up what I've done a little bit for the purpose of being able to get at everything Arch Enemy has going on here, because they do have a lot of stuff going on. So we are in, as we can see right here, we got 7 flats. That's the key of A flat minor. Now, that's just in the intro. The entire song actually has several key changes, and we'll discuss those. But the key of A flat minor is, as we can see, in the key, and let me go ahead and get the circle of fifths up. The key of A flat minor is all the way over here. You don't see the A flat minor right here. That's the major. C flat major is the relative major to A flat minor. So we're kind of in this general vicinity on the circle of fifths, if you would, sort of in the nether regions, I've heard some people refer to it as. So for the intro and outro, that's where we're going to be at. So with all that setup out of the way, let's go ahead and get into what's going on in the song and actually listen to it. All right, so as you could hear right there, or maybe just, you know, not hear, but more so kind of feel, we do have quite a few things going on here. So first of all, if we're going to go ahead and look at what the bass and the guitars are doing in unison together, they are, the rhythm guitar that is, and the bass line are more or less sort of following similarly here to each other. Now, we see the bass line going right here, basically ascending from an A flat minor to a B flat diminished, up to a C flat minor, which is the sort of flat 3 in the key of A flat minor, while at the same time, we're going to have to move down some for this, we see the guitar doing similar things, basically parodying that movement right there, moving in a fashion up to the C. And that's kind of like that's almost like a lead line. Even though the notes aren't super high, they're not terribly low, at least most of them aren't. They're kind of there going along with the bass, but if I remember correctly in the actual song, they are also panned over to one side. So on one side you have the sort of rhythmic line that's following the bass, and on the other side you have the tapped part coming out, and in the center of course you have the bass, which is being matched by one of the guitars. Cool effect in order to make the song sound like it has a lot of movement and power, yet also cohesion behind it. So good stuff right there. Let's go ahead and continue on now and listen to just the first part again and pay attention to the tapping. Okay, then there's a lot of repetition, obviously. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the lead line for a second. Now, I'm going to hide a couple things here so we can get a better, like, sort of gaze at what's happening here and see what's going on. Now, as I mentioned before, if you look your attention right to here, I have, along with the sort of general implied chord forms based off of what the bass guitar is doing, I have also notated what I believe the lead tapping guitar to be doing as represented by what notes are being hit right here. So for example, if you look, say, right here in this section, you can kind of tell that what's being outlined here when the tapping is happening is an A flat chord. The reason for that being, if you look really closely, we have essentially the 1 of A flat, the flat 3, and then jumping up to the 5. That more or less spells out an A flat minor chord to you, and you have the 2 in there right here in the highlighted section as well. But that more or less spells out an A flat minor chord. Now, no doubt you have something like the 2 in here. It sounds good, number one, but also because if you're physically tapping something like that out on the guitar, it can be quite difficult for you to be able to just tap out in a fashion like this, straight triads without throwing another note in there, just based on what your hands are doing. So no doubt a technique to allow the guitarist to be able to access those 16th notes in a quick fashion that sounds cool, but also is done in a playable fashion, so he's not having to do anything too crazy with his hands or anything like that. So we have that outlined here, and the bass is more or less playing along with that, with some exceptions. We do have this note right here, this E, which comes in right before, then the tapping starts along with the A flat minor right here. We then do see an ascension with the implied chord in the bass, transcending up from the B flat diminished to the C minor, where it then hits an F flat right here. And what do we have going on in the tapping line along with that? Well, we also kind of have an F flat chord implied here. Once again, we can see the 1 of F flat, the 2, the 3, and the 5, jumping up that 3rd right there between those 2 highlighted notes to the 5, as we could see. Very almost identical interval movements with the last measure we just looked at. And taking a quick look at what the lead guitar is doing, more or less following right along. The F was right here, remember. If we look down here, we see another F going on here. So that sort of one side rhythm guitar pan that's kind of doing the single held notes along with the bass, pretty much following exactly along. So right now we have a lot of cohesion in what's transpiring, and this gives the song a very unified feel. Now stuff's going to get a little bit interesting when we move to the 3rd measure. So I'm going to go ahead and play this from the start and we'll get there. Okay, so now you got some interesting stuff happening here. So the first thing that's going on here is that the bass is actually playing a G natural, okay? So now in the key of A flat minor, the G, the flat 7, is typically just that. It's a flat. It's a G flat in this case. But what they're doing is they are borrowing from the harmonic minor scale right here. That's a natural 7. And just to be kind of explicit about what that means, I got some stuff here pre-prepared. The harmonic minor scale, if you're looking at it from the standpoint of in standard tuning, E harmonic minor, it's a pattern that looks something similar to this, or rather is exactly this. It's just stretched out across the entire fretboard. Instead of having the open D right here, you basically just sharp that flat 7, if that makes any sense. You make the flat 7 a natural 7, and that would be right here. And that gives you that harmonic minor kind of sound. And I'll leave this up for a second, everything, while I sort of explain what's happening here. You do that, and you get a sound that can give you a lot of energy, a lot of punch. It can sound almost Egyptian if used in a certain fashion. And it's routinely used in not just metal songs, but all kinds of songs to give an aggressive and powerful extra kick to whatever melody or lead line or rhythmic line, in this case, they have going on. So it's a great tool to be able to use to give your song that extra kind of aggressive or unhinged feeling to what's going on. So let's go ahead and get on back to the tab itself. Now, so we're from here, right? G diminished. Now, why do I say diminished? Well, because in harmonic minor, in A flat harmonic minor specifically, the flat 7 is transitioned to a 7, regular old 7. The 7 in whatever key you're in is diminished. For example, if you're in C major, that 7 there is B diminished. And what that means here is that this G natural is also G diminished, so it becomes a diminished chord. So that's why I say that right there. You know, and you can see some of that being enacted here on the tapping part as well. Once again, tapping part more or less following along precisely to what's happening above. We have the natural G as seen right here, ascending, doing the exact same thing, going up to its second, or its flat second in this case, its flat 3, and then going to its flat 5. So it has a very, very diminished sound to it, but it sounds even more edgy and more intense because it's done in a fashion that allows it to have that energy that comes from the harmonic minor scale, from E or A flat harmonic minor in this case. So good stuff right there. We then have some more ascensions. We quickly hit the B flat, and then I'm getting to the 4th measure, which I'll play. G diminished. And from there, it kind of comes to rest, so to speak, on the A flat minor. All right, then the song repeats. So keeping in mind what we just looked at, let's go ahead and play the whole thing all the way through. All right, so then there's a little bit of a change up. So remember, what you can do when you're in a situation like this, if you want to make a song sound even more intense, draw from the harmonic minor scale. And in this case, they went all the way with it because not only did they draw from the harmonic scale and add that in, not only did they add that natural 7 into A flat minor, they actually based an entire measure, an entire movement, so to speak, off of the natural 7, which is a diminished chord. It's a very, very powerful way to instantly give your song some edge, some intensity, and it played in a certain context, it can sound very creepy, very kind of scary and everything too. Not necessarily saying it sounds that way here, but there is sort of an eerie feel to it even in this song. So it's a great, great technique if you're looking to do those sorts of things. Now, the song changes up a little bit here. I'm going to play the whole thing from the top, and we're going to get to the next part here. And here comes the new part. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there because the very last couple measures in here have something else going on a little bit different that I want to make sure I can talk about specifically. So let's go ahead and look at the sort of full repeat of the song. Now, right here, as can be heard, the guitar on one side, the not tapping guitar, if you would, the held note guitar, everything ascends an octave for it. So we go up an octave, more or less doing precisely the same thing. Adding just a touch of flair in here, I just have written, we have a few hammer-ons and pulled off in there. They're conforming to what the chord up here is, what the implied one is. I didn't note it down, but they are sort of conforming to that. Always a good little technique. Throw in some hammer-ons and pull-offs here or there that are more or less in the chord tone you're implying to mix things up a little bit. Everything's still an octave higher. Some more flair. Then, to finish it off, the final part of the song actually, and I'm going to play it back, they actually do some really interesting things here, so let's play it. Okay. Alright, so we have a couple things going on here in this almost, what is it, third to last measure right here. So again, it sounds very creepy, very unhinged, very like, aggressive and angry and stuff like that with that slide they have going on right here. So what you can view that little bit as is essentially, and you can view it several different ways, you can view it as them drawing a sharp fourth in their A minor scale. you can view it as a perfect fourth to G natural, which is something that is actually played right here. So the G natural is once again utilized. Now that's the harmonic minor scale note, if you would. You know, it's a half, or rather a minor second away, a half step away from the A flat. So they're once again drawing on that in the bass, and along with that, they're playing it in the tapping part. But just as an interesting thing, they also added in here a D natural. And what that D natural is essentially a perfect fifth of a G natural. And just to be specific, the G natural right here in the bass, and this is the bass, remember, this right here is the bass clef and everything. So if it seems confusing, that's why. This is the bass clef. This G natural, the perfect fifth of that G natural. And by perfect fifth, I mean in terms of like just interval distance within an octave. This is not within the same octave, but it is nonetheless like all collapsed to an octave, if you want to think of it. This right here, this D natural, is a perfect fifth of that G natural. So again, just drawing something in from outside the key to make it sound kind of unhinged and crazy. One more thing you could view this D natural note as is a blues note, all right? So in a minor blues note. And that's essentially, if you're playing a minor pentatonic, all you do is you add to the pentatonic a sharp fourth, and I've heard that referred to as like the blues notes. It's the note that makes the blues scale versus a minor pentatonic scale and such like that. So, you know, why am I talking about all this stuff right here? Oh, what's up, Casey? I don't know if he looks too happy, but yeah. So why am I talking about all this stuff right here? Well, the reason is this. There's tons and tons of things that can be done in order to make a song sound interesting. Something we've talked about over and over again throughout the course of our discussions with this. And even something like this, that's very, very outside the realm of what is typical, of what is commonplace within a diatonic scale, because this isn't a diatonic scale. There's still logic and understanding that can be found from something that would sound as unhinged and kind of out of key even as this. And why is that important? Well, if you hear it here and you understand what's happening here, you can draw it up in your head later if you want to make something that sounds kind of unhinged and utilize that. For example, I know for a fact now that if I ever wanted to do something that sounded very kind of creepy, very unhinged, there's two things here. Go to the harmonic minor scale, and by that I mean go to it and go to the seventh, the natural seven of it, and go ahead and to that add the sharp 4 from whatever minor scale I'm initially in to give that sound of a perfect fifth coming from the harmonic minor scale natural 7. And specifically, what do I mean by that? Go to the G natural. If you're in A flat minor, go to the G natural and add a D natural on top of it. And from there, you obtain that sound. And that's something that can be used in other instances should you want to. And that's the really cool part about all this, is that it gives us the ability to reverse engineer it and to take it into our own songwriting for our own metal that we want to do and get all kinds of interesting effects from. So good stuff right here. Now, there are a couple more measures, so I'm going to go back a little bit and we're going to go ahead and play those right now. Okay, so really, really cool little section, you know, like this whole intro right here, it has a lot of touches in it to me that makes me feel it really shows Arch Enemy's musicianship, which is super cool. So let's talk about what they did here. So they, this bar right here is the one we were just discussing with the G natural and such like that. So we're going to talk about the last two. Okay, so from the standpoint of the implied chord, as we can see right here, they more or less, almost at the end entirely, we have this eighth note hanging out here, but more or less entirely at the end, they go to the root of A flat minor, which is the A flat minor for the bass. From there, they have a sort of trill section, if you would, based off of related notes. So right here, you have the A, all right? That would be A4 specifically. Right here, and where is it? Right here, you also have an A. So what's going on here? You have a C. So what essentially is happening here is you have A4 right here and B4 right here ringing out in the lower sort of lead guitar harmony. Then right here, you have C5, it'd be, if I'm not mistaken, C5, and D5 ringing out here. So you have what is essentially a third harmony, but it's not so much a third as it would be, I always get it mixed up, but it's like, it's thirds an octave higher. You can say 15th, 16th, you know, you can actually get into those territories. There are flat 13ths, there can be 14ths, there can be all kinds of different ways to talk about stuff, although to be fair, I don't typically hear even flat 13s talked about much in certain contexts as that is, and I've actually haven't heard anyone refer to it as a flat 14. I'm just saying you could potentially carry out in that fashion if you wanted to discuss it in that way. I'm not saying that's typically textbook or anything though. So what they do there is they do a trill, and then just another great technique to sort of underscore what they got going on in Arch Enemy's just creativity is they slightly, and it's really hard to see here because the tempos increase in a way where Guitar Pro writes them all mixed up and such, but basically the tempos slow down like crazy at this very first part of the trill to 45, to BPM of 45. They then speed up at the end. And, you know, if you're actually playing that, do you need to be thinking about this in a fashion where it's like, okay, I'm going to slow down to BPM 20, and then no, you play a little bit slower and everything while you're recording or while you're jamming, then you speed it up, then you kind of try to figure out whatever tempo would conform to that best while you're writing it down so you can replicate it and everything. You know, nothing too crazy going on here. So that right there, if I'm not mistaken, is everything. Now, after that, the drum fill part pretty much comes in where the intro definitively ends, and it transitions its way into the next part of the song, which is right here, which we will actually go ahead and discuss next time. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I want to break it up so we can properly discuss everything going on here without the video being way too long. So guys, I appreciate you taking the time to check out this video. If you could do me a big favor, I'd appreciate you looking up a fairly new song I put out. It's called Celestial Fray. You can find it on Spotify and all the other streaming services by looking up Spike's Signal there, just like you see here on YouTube. And if you could let me know what you think about it, that'd be really awesome. I'd appreciate it. But until next time, we'll come back to this. We'll finish out the song in several parts. It'll be a little bit, but we will get through the whole thing. And I thank you for keeping it right here at the Spike Signal.